Negotiations are moving forward, but the reports we're getting is that it's rather slow. There are still issues that are under consideration amongst delegations. And also similarly, the group on Article 6.2, they feel that they're making progress, but hopefully we hope they might be in a position to conclude by this week, but if not, there's always the possibility to move forward after that. That's regarding the negotiations, the most recent update that I have. But there was also a very active and full and dynamic finance day yesterday, which really witnessed many events, and there will be a full brief coming out on it. I'll share the highlights, and of course I have more details if anyone is interested to learn more about the main features of the finance day. There's too much to cover, but I'll just say that it witnessed many things. One of them was the launching of something called the Sustainable Debt Coalition Initiative. This initiative to highlight the fiscal climate challenges facing developing nations, to spur coalition action to alleviate the debt burden, and launch new pathways for consultations at the intersection of debt, climate, and development. You can easily see this intersection. Many developing countries suffer debt stress, and on many occasions the very nature of the climate finance landscape requires or necessitates going out to the market to obtain loans, and those loans only, of course, have the potential of exacerbating an already difficult debt situation in many countries. So this initiative focuses on that. There was another Egyptian COP27 presidency initiative launched with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. They jointly launched something called Reducing the Cost of Green and Sustainable Borrowing Initiative, which serves a similar purpose, but this is focusing on climate vulnerable countries, and it aims as well to address the deteriorating fiscal health under threat by potential output losses linked to climate hazards. There was the launch as well of the report by the independent high-level expert group on scaling up investment and finance to deliver on climate ambition and development. The title of that report, and it's a very, very important report, and I'll mention a few words about it: Finance for Climate Action, Scaling Up Investment for Climate and Development. This is an initiative that Egyptian COP27 presidency and the former British UK COP26 presidency jointly launched in collaboration with the high-level climate champions, and they commissioned or requested a high-level group of experts, Vera Songwe, a renowned economist from Africa, and Lord Nick Stern from the United Kingdom. They were the lead, and they assembled a very prominent group of economic and fiscal policy and climate finance experts to prepare this report on our behalf, and I think it's a very useful report. It's been published already. We held a roundtable for this exercise in Cairo on October 24th, and yesterday was the official launch of that very important report, and it really contains some very important recommendations for those interested in the more conceptual problems with the global climate finance landscape to see, and it has some steps forward that will continue to follow. The day also witnessed presentation of the outcomes of the 5 regional forums. That was another activity initiated and launched by the 2 presidencies with the climate champions. These were very good roundtables that took place over the year with the 5 economic commissions of the UN. I participated in 3 of them virtually. I couldn't travel that much, but there was the African one in Addis Ababa, there was the European one in Geneva, there was the Latin American Caribbean in Chile, Santiago de Chile, and Thailand, Bangkok for the Asian Economic Commission. And these were intended to work with local entities to make sure that there are projects that are ready for funding. They use the word bankable, and I personally object to it because the climate realm isn't the same as regular investment, so I don't like the word bankable projects, but financeable, if that's a word, projects, and they came up with a large group of projects that will be matched with financial entities And I think that is a good practical way of addressing it. While we're all expressing concerns about the setup as it exists, this was a step forward in going to the grassroots level, and I saw the projects being presented by many countries, and I think the balance between adaptation and mitigation was very good in those roundtables, and it still remains to be seen when they actually receive the funding and move forward. That could serve as a pilot for addressing a lot of the problems of access to appropriate finance. Yesterday, there was also the announcement of the second Net Zero Delivery Summit, which was hosted by the UK in the spring of it will be hosted by the UK in the spring of 2023 in collaboration with COP27 presidency. I have much more, but I'll leave it at that. And we can, I think, move to questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move to the questions, I would like just to give you an update on the numbers. So from yesterday evening, 6 p.m., we have 28,293 registered party delegates, 14,137 observers, 3,402 representatives from media organizations. These are registered participants, and just to put it in perspective, a total of 45,832, and pick up of badges, so that means who is picked up the badge physically, who is already on site, is 29,330. Now we are ready to take your questions. Let me start in the third row, the gentleman.
John Ainger from Bloomberg News. Thank you very much. You mentioned the cover text. Do you already have an idea about how that might look, and is there anything that the Egyptian presidency is going to be pushing for, in particular at the end of COP27? And also, I just wanted to ask you, I'm sure you're aware, NGOs have had a number of problems with regard to hotels, prices, being kicked out of hotels, being made to share small rooms with many people inside. What is the Egyptian presidency doing about that? Many thanks.
Thank you very much for both questions. On the first one, the first week we tried to leave the space for the technical work under the subsidiary bodies. We, as I announced, will start the first round of discussions early on Saturday. I think it's going to be announced, or if it already hasn't been, the exact time. That is just to receive inputs from all delegations. We will, I think, right after that have maybe 2 or 3 more detailed conversations, but we need to not preempt those conversations until we receive the views of all parties, usually through regional groups, to get a sense of what the priorities of the parties are, because at the end of the day, this is the property of the entirety of the parties. But I can't answer specifically whether we have our own priorities. Our singular objective at the end of the day is to show and demonstrate action and progress and meaningful, impactful steps forward. So that is the common thread. We will have the inputs, of course, coming in from the negotiations and the various decisions, but we will always be focused on attempting, to the extent possible, of course, to show that there is progress and to include positive steps being taken forward across the board. Regarding the hotels, you mentioned, we're aware of that, not attributed to NGOs or non-NGOs. We heard of cases, while these are private entities, the COP presidency through government officials have intervened, and we've addressed some of the specifics that were taken up and brought to our attention, but we've also asked everyone to continue to bring cases to us as rapidly as possible so we can interfere, but it's not always about just addressing a particular case. We need to get to the root of it and see what kind of problems exist, and we address them. And I know that issues that happened in one case at least, where people were asked to leave, the instruction, I can assure you from the highest level of government, was that doesn't happen, shouldn't happen, will not happen again. People should be allowed in, and then we settle any other issues and see who has what rights and other obligations. So that is being taken care of, and we heard other technical issues being brought to our attention, and we're encouraging everyone to continue. I can relay them. We have a full team working on that with Ambassador Ashraf Ibrahim, and he's working pretty much around the hour to ensure that these issues are addressed through the right channels as rapidly as possible. Another issue, which was, again, subject of a lot of complaint, was the prices of food around the venue. And I received that personally from many people and through not official channels, but conversations with parties and civil society organizations. And again, this was with the contractor, but Minister Shukri, the COP president, took the necessary action when it was brought to his attention. And I understand that today there was a decision, and I think it's been announced. I haven't seen the official announcement, but I saw it on Twitter. Happy people saying it's 50% off, free beverages of all types. I think soft drinks and water are free, and that's a gesture of goodwill, and that's the best that we could do, bring prices down 50%. Hopefully that brings it within reason for everyone participating.
The lady in the first row.
Thank you. Polita Clark, Financial Times. I just want to ask about the cover text. Some countries are pushing for an oil and gas phase down to be included in that. Could you update us on that and how likely you think it is that it's going to get into the final cover text? Thank you.
Again, it is very early days to see what the final exact wording would be on every issue, particularly one of this type of importance. And I'm sure you're aware, as many are, that this is not the easiest of issues to find consensus around. What we can do and will continue to do and have started actually doing is to talk directly with parties who might have sensitive issues, or I don't like the expression red lines, but hard positions on issues, to make sure that we make best use of time between now and that last day when we hopefully smoothly adopt something that everyone can live with. Again, this is a party-owned, party-driven process, and we need to find the right balance between parties. And our role as presidency is to work in front of the scenes and behind the scenes to ensure that everyone feels that their concerns are taken on board, sensitivities are accommodated, and no one is left behind. That is also something we're always cognizant of. But my answer, I wish I could tell you exactly. It's still very early in the process of articulating any language with regard to the covering decision.
The lady here in front, in the middle.
Thanks. Megan Rowling from Thomson Reuters. Two questions. You talked a lot about the finance discussions yesterday, and there's this issue of a lot of developing countries finding themselves loaded up with debt, but at the same time, a lot of the finance on offer is loans. I'm just wondering if there are concrete ideas emerging about how to prevent their debt burden growing. And secondly, there was a report out this morning saying that the number of fossil fuel lobbyists at these talks have gone up by more than a quarter since last year. And I'm just wondering what your response is to that, and whether there are any moves to limit the number of such delegates at the talks, especially given that they're in UAE next year, which has a large proportion in their delegation. Thanks.
Thanks. The finance point you alluded to is almost universal. It comes up in every conversation. I attended in one shape or the other 4 finance events, and 2 or 3 main features were always there. The issue of MDBs and how they can play a central role in addressing that very specific point through SDRs and through shifting and their view or philosophy in a world to accommodate and adapt to a world where climate crisis is the main challenge. And the other one was the point, and it's also related to MDBs, which is the concessionality or grant component in whatever climate finance is already available. But that is all in the, I don't want to call it informal, but not within the negotiations. The negotiations have their own pace, and they are subject to consensus between 190 plus member states. And debt as such is a byproduct of the conversation, but there's no item. The main items we have, of course, there's a list of items on finance on the agenda, but the new ones that we're supposed to be addressing is the NCQG, which I mentioned earlier, and that doesn't go directly to the debt issue. And the other one that goes, I think, is very central, which is the definition of climate finance, because that is a matter of trust and credibility. What is ODA? What is climate finance? And where do you introduce the climate part into finance? But to your main point on debt, this is highly recognized, and the first two issues that I announced were launched yesterday were specific initiatives beyond the negotiation to coalesce around the issue of making sure that we're not compounding the debt stress in many developing countries. And all of this is documented in financial reports. The level of debt in many countries just makes it very, very difficult for them to go out and get more debt to address a problem they see that they contributed very, very little to creating in the first place. Yeah. You mentioned the presence of fossil fuel lobbies. It's very difficult. I don't have exact figures and comparisons and who is a lobbyist and who is representing an entity and who is representing a scientific community. So I'll take your word on that. But the point is, we are very careful to ensure that any representations coming with regard to not just the fossil fuel industry. There are other industries as well that contribute to emissions. We have the cement industry, fertilizers, steel. These are all heavy, high emission industries. And we have a decarbonization day. Again, this is separate from the negotiations. This is where we want to show best practices. And we have parameters that have been provided to all of these industries for someone who can come and verify what they've been doing very positively and subjected to scrutiny to ensure that they've been doing things in the past and what their projections and commitments or pledges they are willing to make. So the context isn't going to be to allow anyone to come and pretend they're doing something. They will be putting themselves, whoever are there, because it's a full day, so you have multiple industries, maybe not just these four, maybe there's going to be sessions about other sectors, but the whole idea is to show that you can decarbonize in these sectors and move forward in accordance with a plan, and able also to demonstrate what you've been doing in the past to make you a good example for others. So that's what I have to say on that.
The gentleman here in the first row.
Hello, thank you. Peter Bringerman from Associated Press. I just want to ask for a comment from the presidency on the situation of Alaa Abdel Fattah. We heard from his family earlier today that there has been intervention. We don't have a lot of details, but medical intervention. So I just want to ask if that's the case, confirm that, and anything else you can update on this situation.
Right. I don't have anything or information coming to me with regard to what's happening outside of the COP. I can tell you that we witnessed there was a press conference by the family here in the COP, and there were other events during the evening. I think it was yesterday where this issue was brought up, and that's definitely part of the theme around the COP, that everyone can speak their mind and make whatever statements they wish to make. But I really don't know anything about the situation outside of what's happening here. So the limitations on me are what I'm receiving informally, that I know events are taking place related to the case that you alluded to. But that's the extent of my knowledge. What happens outside is just not reported to me.
The lady here in the first row.
Thank you. Susie El-Ginedi, Deputy Chief Editor of العربي magazine. Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned that Section 6, which is, I think, concerning the carbon market, we're having negotiations and it's not going forward. Can you please shed some light about this, why it's not getting forward? Because carbon market is very important. Second point, concerning net zero, also you mentioned it's not going forward a bit. Is it okay? What is happening on the negotiation concerning net zero? Because also this is very important. Thank you.
No, maybe I wasn't clear. Article 6 is making progress, but it is facing some of the discussions on Article 6, I can assure you, are always very, very technical and difficult. But the essence of my messaging is that everyone acknowledges it's important and it's a big part of the solution to the climate finance situation. A part, I stress. It won't solve it on its own, and everyone is committed, but it is a very consequential Article 6, on cooperative mechanisms, and other 6.2, 6.4, and 6.8 are all very important, but there's nothing new here. That was, if you recall, the very last part of the Paris Agreement that took multiple years, even between 2015. We weren't successful in completing it until in Glasgow. So it is just the nature of the complexity of that paragraph, but please don't take anything that I said about the pace to mean that people aren't devoted completely and the time is being made for them to resolve it. Your second point was net zero. There's my mention of net zero was more about one of the outcomes of the finance day. So it wasn't in the negotiating track. Net zero isn't part of the negotiations. Net zero is an outcome of pledges. Responsible countries have taken it upon themselves, and not only countries, but corporations and other entities have committed to targets on reaching carbon neutrality by certain dates. So this isn't anything to agree or disagree upon, because it's not a negotiated text. So I think the initiatives coming outside complement the negotiating track. Negotiating track within the climate process is about mitigation by and large. It's governed by the Convention and by the Paris Agreement and the principles of both. So that is governed, as an entity, but all initiatives are welcome. We all realize the solutions aren't only going to come through the legal structure of the negotiations, but even more so in the short term through such initiatives that we all salute and encourage.
The gentleman here in the middle.
Thank you. Mahmoud Gharib from JSOR 2030 for Sustainable Development. First of all, would you allow me to ask in Arabic? شكرا معالي السفير. احنا يعني ما قبل المؤتمر كنا بنتكلم عن ان في
I'll be translating the question when I answer for
ما قبل المؤتمر كان في 4 محاور بنتكلم عنهم بخصوص الكوب 27، وهو الخاص بالتكيف والتخفيف والفيناء التمويل والاضرار والخسائر. امبارح كان في اليوم التمويل، وحضرتك تفضلت وتحدثت عن ال5 منتديات الإقليمية الخاصة بالتمويل اللي تم عقدها في مختلف أنحاء العالم. السؤال هو دلوقتي هو بعد هذا الموضوع، بعد ما موضوع التمويل ما خلص، هو يوم التمويل امبارح، هل كده ملف التمويل بالنسبة للكوب 27 أغلق خلاص، ما ننتظرش نتائج أخرى، ولا في مفاوضات في مسار آخر بتتم في نفس إطار التمويل؟ وكان حضرتك طبعا تفضلت وذكرت أبرز النتائج اللي خلص ليها يوم التمويل أو الفعاليات اللي تمت في خلال هذا اليوم. هل حضرتك شايف أن هذه النتائج يعني تتوافق مع الطموحات اللي كنا بنأملها من هذا المؤتمر؟ شكرا لحضرتك.
The question was about the outcomes of the Finance Day, and whether the first question is, since that day has been concluded, the first question was, now that the day is concluded, does that mean our consideration of finance is over? And the second part was about outcomes of that Finance Day. So my answer, أقدر أقولها بالإنجليزي؟ Okay. My answer to the first part is finance has the nature of being cross-cutting. There will be no progress, not insufficient progress at least, on mitigation without appropriate finance. The same for adaptation, and indeed the same apparently now for funding of loss and damage. So it is the common factor, or the common denominator, or the catalyst to achieve all of our ambition across the board on all aspects of the climate action agenda. So it will continue in every shape and form. On the negotiation side, not that the Finance Day addressed it, but that is the main intergovernmental track, and that will continue, as I mentioned, with always our climate finance people are the ones running around with the largest workload, so they will continue with their agenda items, including the two that I mentioned on definition of climate finance and the new collective quantified role. So the governmental work will continue. The finance day yesterday was governmental, intergovernmental, but not a negotiating track. So that had all of these outcomes. Each one of these outcomes that I mentioned, and there are many, many more. It was, I think, the largest day out of all the 11 thematic days, and the most that we had trouble accommodating in number of sessions and speakers. So each one of them has tailored and structured in it a follow-up mechanism. So these are things moving forward. They were just announced and launched yesterday, but each and every one of them will have its own follow-up mechanism to ensure what you were talking about. And the outcomes, nothing in climate, unfortunately, is by a switch that you say, okay, we decided this and we achieved it. It's accumulative, and as we say, COPs are not events, they're part of a process, they're an annual event, but we stress, and this presidency has been stressing from day one, follow up, follow up, follow up. On the negotiating side, on the pledges side, on the initiative side, or else we'll be just wasting everyone's time if it's just something for a photo op and an announcement without follow-up. We're not always successful. It's human nature, but we try to stress this and make sure that we have a follow-up mechanism in place. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A quick last question, the gentleman here in the second row.
Thank you so much. So I have a question about the official COP27 app from the Ministry of Interior. It's been raised some concerns about it, and security experts say it can be used for surveillance. What would be your comment on that, Mr. Ambassador? Thank you.
Could you please tell us who you are?
Kjetil Alstheim from Aftenposten in Norway.
Okay. I haven't seen any official allegation to that effect, but I saw a claim in a media outlet. And upon my initial inquiry, I was told how unlikely or physically or technically impossible for that to be, because it is on Google Play and on other app stores, I think the Apple Store, and they have their own protocols and cybersecurity. They would never allow that. And my understanding, and I'll verify to you in the next meeting if you're interested, there has been a cybersecurity assessment done, and it refuted that completely. So it's an allegation, and I think the persons who put it in place should substantiate it by making the claim more publicly and proving how it was. But the first response that I received was, it's on Google and on Apple, the stores for both platforms, and they're very good at ensuring that none of that happens. So that's the information I have on that.
Thank you very much for today. See you tomorrow again at 1:30.
Hello, test, check, hello, test, hello, test, hello, test, hello,